Welcome to the Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Hi, I'm Justin McCarthy, editor of the Irish Farmers Journal. The deadline to apply for the main farming support schemes under the new cap is falling this Friday, and I know many Irish farmers are scrambling to fill out their forms at the moment. We, at the Irish Farmers Journal, have been trying to give everyone as much clarity as possible in the paper every week, on our website farmersjournal.ie, and in this podcast. Last week, we also started a new series of live video broadcasts, bringing experts around my desk to give the best technical advice to Irish farmers. For the first edition, we discussed the Beef Data and Genomics Programme, one of the schemes closing for applications this Friday, and you can watch the entire show at farmersjournal.tv. I started by asking Brendan Gleeson, who oversees meat policy at the Department of Agriculture, what the government wanted to achieve with this new form of suckler payment.
Well, Justin, it's about the development of the beef sector, and that's something everyone around the table here has a common interest in. And it's about positioning the suckler herd as part of that dynamic. And from a public policy perspective, the Department and the Minister think that the suckler herd has a very important part to play in the production of quality Irish beef. We know that there are significant problems with poor profitability in the beef herd. We know that that is at least in part attributable to poor genetics on the maternal side. And this scheme is about addressing those weaknesses and ultimately about improving farmer profitability. Now, of course, there are other impacts also, because by improving efficiency and profitability on the beef herd, we also improve the greenhouse gas intensity of the beef sector. That's very important from a number of perspectives. Firstly, in the context of international discussions on the future of livestock industries, it's very important to position Ireland's already strong environmental credentials, but also to improve on those in the context of international debate around climate change. And secondly, of course, the fact that Ireland has a very environmentally sustainable industry and that we are taking strides to improve it is a key part of our marketing strategy in international markets. So for all of these reasons, this scheme is a very important step. It's about serious suckler farmers making commitments to improve their own efficiency, but also to improve the environmental sustainability of their herds. So
really it's twofold: to boost the profitability by producing more and reducing the carbon footprint by producing more from less.
Exactly, and it addresses weaknesses that are widely accepted, and of course you don't have to rely on the department's word for that, because we have experts like Andrew Cromie, Donald Berry of Teagasc, and I know that you've written extensively on this maternal index also, Justin. So there is a difficulty there, and this scheme is intended to improve that situation.
So we need to work on the maternal side, and the Beef Data and Genomics Programme requires farmers to carry out a lot more genotyping on their herds than we have ever seen before. I asked Andrew Cromie of ICBF if this would help us achieve every suckler farmer's objective: identify that cow that delivers top quality cows with an adequate milk supply year after year.
All of the potential replacement females that are coming into the suckler herd, we need to have them genotyped. And we need to have them genotyped because that's the way we get an accurate picture in terms of that animal's genetic merit for what drives profitability. In the 700,000 cows that were in the BGS, or the last year's scheme of 720,000 cows, we had 640,000 calvings, all right? Half of those are female calves. That generates 300,000 female calves coming from the suckler herd. Now, 40% of those are going to be 4 and 5 stars. That's 120,000. And it's those animals that we need to bring in as the potential replacement females. And because at the moment we're only bringing in 30,000 4 and 5 star females a year. That's our problem. And to shift that from 30,000 to a target figure which we've developed in the context of the scheme, we need to get it to 80,000. And of course, one of the objectives of the scheme, because we do want to have it simple, collecting the DNA, is that we tissue tag at birth. The latest research, and Donald Berry Teagasc has been undertaking the research with us, for a trait like female fertility, which is lowly heritable, very, very hard to look at any female, an animal, and say, will she be fertile? Having that piece of DNA is the equivalent to having 70 progeny on that animal. 70. So we moved from a single animal to actually now a cow with one calving to potentially looking at a heifer replacement, potential heifer.
Before she even calves down.
That has 70 progeny. And with 70 progeny, we'd certainly know if that animal's going to be fertile or not.
Maybe you're still wondering, are the prospects for improved performance good enough to justify the effort of joining the scheme? IFA's Director of Livestock, Kevin Kinsella, believes so, And he told us at the Irish Farmers Journal that farmers should get their applications in to benefit from the resources available.
We want suckler farmers to participate in this scheme. We want them to apply. We want to get the money out. And we will measure it in terms of how much goes out by Christmas. We have to deal with the concerns and the issues that have been raised over the last week. Thousands of farmers coming into meetings. Thousands of farmers ringing the boys on the hotline and ringing ICBF. Our phones and your phones are red here with guys ringing, right? We have to deal with those issues. The Minister has to address those issues. We have to have more flexibility, and hopefully we'll get that from the Minister. And the fear factor in terms of applying for this scheme will be removed and people will apply. And I'm encouraged by Gordon saying that there's 8,000 in already. Yeah. We want to get that to 40 or 45,000 guys in there. That's what the Minister said. He wants to maximise the number of suckler farmers that are applying for this scheme. The Minister was very strong in that yesterday. And the money's there. The money is there under the Rural Development Plan. Ireland worked very hard to get it. We need to get that out on farms.
And any additional money required, if there is a surge, Kevin, no doubt will be found from somewhere.
There's 500 and something million in the Rural Development Package. Money isn't the issue here. Money isn't the issue here in terms of suckler farmers. And hopefully, and as you know, we have a proposal there to try and increase the level of payment to suckler farmers. I mean, it's important to make the point, Justin. 24 out of the member states across Europe are coupling suckler cows. The French are putting in a payment of €178 per suckler cow. That, unfortunately, that's the route we should have went down. We didn't. We're now in this. Let's try and get the applications in.
We hope that you're enjoying this Irish Farmers Journal podcast. Find out more at farmersjournal.ie.
This Friday is also the deadline to apply for the basic payment scheme, and young farmers have every reason to make sure their forms are handed in on time. They'll get a top-up in addition to the general payment, and some of them still have a chance of applying for entitlements from the National Reserve. There's also a new support scheme for investment in farm buildings opening this week. Macra na Feirme was one of the organisations that lobbied hardest to get the dedicated support for young farmers. Let's hear from their president, Seán Finan, and their rural affairs manager, Derry Dillon.
This is a very busy week for all farmers and indeed their Teagasc advisors and their advisors right across the country. Derry, do you want to run through the different schemes that are going to be closing on Friday?
Yeah, so we've come down to the wire now, and basically the important ones are the Young Farmer Top-Up, the 25% top-up, which equates to roughly €64 per hectare for each of the first 50 hectares that a young farmer submits under their basic payment scheme. So you have to submit a separate application for your Young Farmer Top-Up, and that has to be submitted and completed by the 29th of May. There is also a category left in the Basic Payment National Reserve, and that is for young farmers who established in 08 and 09. So they activated a herd number in either of them 2 years, and they're still eligible to apply for the National Reserve up to the 29th of May. And the National Reserve will either top up their existing entitlements up to the national average, which is roughly 250 odd euros a hectare, or if they have no entitlements on their land, it will make them eligible for an entitlement at the national average value of 250 euros a hectare. The background to the Young Farmer Scheme, it's a very important scheme. Maybe just, could you give us a bit of a background of where the scheme originally came from?
Macra is involved in SEJA, which is the European Young Farmers body, and we proposed to SEJA through our Ag Affairs Committee a number of years ago the top-up on the single farm payment for young trained farmers. We were delighted to bring that policy to Brussels and for SEJA to accept it as part of their policy, which fed its way into the Commission document for the proposal with regard to CAP reform. We were delighted then that the top-up and also that the allocation in the National Reserve for young farmers was part of the overall package which was agreed with regards to the new CAP. So Macra has played a big role in the two schemes and ensuring that both schemes were part of the overall CAP package. The schemes will have a big impact in terms of the number of young farmers into the industry. Obviously, the definition of a young farmer, which is defined at EU level, restricts the schemes to farmers within their first 5 years of farming. And we are lobbying to see if there's any possibility that farmers that started prior to 5 years ago can get access to the schemes. They have access to the National Reserve for 08 and 09, but prior to that there are still a number of young farmers in their early farming days that are locked out of both schemes. I know, Derry, we've received around the country as part of our Young Farmer Development Group meetings and also calls to the office queries from a lot of young farmers. Do you want to just give a quick outline as what the main queries are?
Yeah, certainly we've had an awful lot of queries about joint herd numbers and young farmers getting involved with their parents, getting involved farming and signing up to a joint herd number and asking, will this be eligible for the young farmer top up or the National Reserve? For the young farmer top up, certainly it is eligible. They also want to know, is there an off-farm income limit associated with the young farmer top up? And there isn't any off-farm income limits. Around other collaborative group arrangements, they're interested to know, when does the 5-year rule start? So if you're in a group arrangement like a company or a partnership, it's when that group or entity was formed, that's when the activation of the 5-year rule is. Because if you're a young farmer and you're setting up in your own right, it's when you activate the herd number, that's when the 5-year rule starts. So we're really talking about people that started since 2010 and they activated a herd number. They're within the first 5 years of farming and therefore are eligible. So someone that started in 2010 will get 1 year of the top up, and someone that's starting this year will get the full 5 years of the top up.
There's also in Pillar 2 a TAM scheme which will be opened at the end of the month, 28th of May, for young trained farmers. That will entitle them a 60% grant on farm investment, farm improvement. So Derry, do you want to outline quickly the main outlines of the scheme?
We're back to the 5-year rule again. This is the important thing here, that those who have set up within the last 5 years are eligible for the 60% grant rate. Other farmers, there will be another TAM scheme opening fairly shortly, and that'll be at a 40% rate for all other young farmers. But those within the first 5 years of set up are eligible for the 60% rate. There's quite a range of infrastructural grants that are available there, and the additional one that's available for young farmers is the dairy building that won't be available to other farmers. So that's important. If you're putting up the parlour, the dairy building is also included. The collecting yards and the ancillary stuff around, that is included in the grant aid. It's an 80% investment ceiling that you can get the grant on. That's the maximum. So that equates to a €48,000 grant. You don't have to draw down the 80,000 in one go. You can put it under different projects. And then when we come to the partnership scenario, there's two ceilings available there. So if there's, we'll say, parents and siblings, the sibling, if they're within the 5 years, gets the 60% grant, and the parents will get a 40% grant, and that's a maximum investment ceiling of 160,000.
Yes, indeed, Derry, and a few other points that might be of interest to young farmers that are going to apply for this scheme. You can't apply for the scheme on a joint herd number. You have to be involved in a partnership. It's important that you have planning permission for any buildings, and it's specified in the document that outlines the scheme which categories of building requires planning permission. So it's very important that you apply for that and have that before you apply for the scheme. Also, you have to ensure that you're nitrates compliant before you apply for the scheme. And I suppose the other point is you have to have completed safety training. If you have a green cert and advanced certificate in agriculture, and if you've done a safety module as part of that, that will cover you. It's important that farmers and young farmers ensure that the materials that they buy are CE marked and that they comply with the requirements of the legislation. There are just a few points, and also there's an element which is in a separate ceiling, which Derry, you might want to explain about the slurry tanks.
Yes, indeed. There's a measure there for low emission slurry spreading. So there's a separate ceiling of 40,000 available for that. It's technology that minimises the emissions from slurry spreading, like disking, drivel bars, trailing shoes. You can't retrofit a tank. You have to buy the new tank and the appliance at the back of it. The only thing that you can retrofit onto an existing tank is a dribble bar.
The TAM scheme, as we've said earlier, opens on the 28th of May. It will be open for 3 months in the first tranche, and then it will reopen again in a number of tranches following on right through the year. It's very important that farmers apply within the 3 months, and then I suppose it's important as well to point out that, as I said earlier, this is a very important week to ensure that all of the applications are submitted. Your basic payment application, your application for your young farmer top-up if you're eligible, if you're an older young farmer in a 8 or 9 category, or a National Reserve application should be submitted. Overall, these are very important. The young farmer schemes are very important for us as young farmers to ensure that we get an access to a single farm payment and access to the different schemes. So it's important that we put an effort in to ensure that our applications are submitted on time.
You're listening to the Irish Farmers Journal podcast.
Now, for a different perspective on beef genetics and farm payments, let's hear one of our regular contributors to the Farmers Journal Farmer Rights column, John Egerton. John has some radical opinions on these issues, and he talked to my colleague Thomas Huber earlier.
I'm from County Fermanagh in Northern Ireland. We have 80 suckler cows and 150 ewes. All progeny is brought through to beef. The standout thing on the farm would be that we're 100% AI, have been for 12 years, no stock bulls. We're very much grass based. We like to get as much as possible out of the grass. We're always trying to push the boundaries, try to get the cattle out in February and keep them out to maybe November or December. Very high rainfall area, up to 150 millimetres of rainfall per year. And it's difficult conditions, but we try to make the best of it.
You've just said 100% AI. That wouldn't be the norm in beef. Why did you choose to do this?
Well, whenever my father was alive, we used to run 2 stock bulls. There were 2 Charlie stock bulls, and there was a lot of difficult calvings. My father used to buy his replacement heifers or replacement stock as cows. I decided that this wasn't working. We were buying in a lot of other people's problems. A lot of cows, there was quick turnover in them. So I learned how to AI. Then I started AI in the first year and kept 1 stock bull. But after the second year, the stock bull only got bull in 1 cow, so I said there was no use in keeping a stock bull for 1 cow. So then we got into the genetics, breeding our own replacements, breeding from easy calving bulls, proven easy calving bulls, and we found that made a great difference. It certainly wouldn't be the norm. If I told people that I was 100% AI, they'd ask me, how do you get the cows in heat, or how do you get them in? But we've bred that into them, we've bred docility into the cows, and the land is fairly much in the one block, and that leaves it more simple for heat detection and for getting the cows in for AI.
Specifically about getting the cows in heat, do you use vasectomized bulls? Do you do any other fertility improvement programs on your farm?
We've no vasectomized bull. Heat detection is all by what we see in the field. We have tried programs, synchronization programs, to bring heifers and cows into heat. Success has been limited with 60%. Some people would be happy with that. I wouldn't be satisfied with that.
What about the sheep side of things? How much would you say that represents in terms of your activity? How important is it on your farm, and why you keep the sheep? Is it because of your land profile?
Yeah, the sheep's kept because of the land type. Land can be wet at times, and it's hard to get the proper utilisation out of the grass. So we try to interchange the sheep and the cattle, and one compensates the other, although sometimes one can challenge the other for grass in the springtime as well. But I sort of find that they fit fairly well together.
And John, whenever you speak in public, such as here at the Balmoral show, you say you are against farm subsidies. Why is that?
I have found my 30 years farming, any time there's subsidy, it has always rewarded the unproductive farmer, the farmer that is willing to go that extra mile to increase production and to do the job better. He has always been discounted against when it comes to subsidies. The latest cap reform, we were led to believe that this would reward the productive farmer. Instead of that, it is the complete opposite. Our biggest limiting factor would be the availability of land. This year, with the new cap reform, it has left it impossible to get land on Conacre or long-term lease. And I felt that if subsidies were done away with, that the unproductive farmers would eventually be weeded out, and the people that could farm would have a greater availability of land and be better positioned to make a good job of farming.
John, thank you very much, and all the best for the future on your farm.
Thank you very much.
The Irish Farmers Journal Weekly Podcast.
Finally, many Irish farm families own shares, either because they have made investment or because they farm with a co-op and receive shares when the company structure changed, as was the case with Glanbia and Kerry. Irish Country Living's money mentor Peter Young talks to consumer editor Ciara Leahy about the tax implications when parents plan to transfer those shares to their children.
Well, the query came in for, I suppose, a retiring Kerry family. The husband and wife are retiring. They would have got a good few shares spun out to them with the Kerry Co-op over the years, and now they've actually gifted the son the farm, and they have these shares and they want to spread them equally between the other 3 children. So they're wondering, is there any way of doing this without having to pay tax? Because there is big tax implications, particularly with the Kerry and more recently the Glanbia spin out shares, because of the low price that actually farmers get them at.
Let's look at the children first. So are the tax implications for the children?
Yeah, there's two sides. There's firstly on the children's side is the gift tax. Each child has a threshold that they're allowed to get tax-free. Now, this threshold has been reducing over the last few years, and it's down to 225,000, which sounds a lot of money. But I mean, when you're talking about passing over agricultural land and that, you can get up to very quick. I mean, in this case, I've been down to a lot of Kerry farms, whatever, and they have substantial shareholdings, and in some cases it could be up to 500,000.
Wow.
So in those cases, whatever, you are talking, you could get up to those bands very quickly.
Right.
In this case, because there's 3 children, and even if it was 500,000, they wouldn't get up to that band, so there wouldn't be any tax implications unless they gifted over 225,000.
Right, okay. So that's the children. They're not really looking at that much tax, or, little, if any. What about the tax implications for the parents?
This is the funny thing about this, because you're trying to give a gift, but yet they're going to be hit quite harshly.
Even though they're trying to do the right thing and set their kids up?
Yeah, and the reason is because when they gift it crystallises the value of the shares at the market price, and we know Kerry shares are about €67 at the moment. They would have got them, they didn't buy them, they got them spun out, so as low as €2-3 a share. You have to take the difference, what the capital gain is, and then basically pay capital gains tax on that. Each, the husband and wife has a threshold of about 1,270 a year, which isn't very much in this context.
Okay.
And over that they have to pay capital gains tax. And in this case, and I just worked it out, if they were transferring 474,000 shares, the tax bill would actually be as high as nearly 144,000.
Wow, that is serious money. So for this family, if they're thinking that's just not an option that we'd like to go down, because it is quite unfair on them, what other options do they have?
Well, it's a good problem to have. What I'd say, you don't want the children, in most cases, you don't want the children actually getting the money for free and the parents lumbered with a tax bill and probably no income as well.
Yeah.
There's 2 options, and one is, you can give actually €3,000 a year tax-free to each of your children every year. So you could do that over time, and actually you could sell the Kerry shares and pay the tax and give them the money.
Okay.
That's what I'd say. If they do still want to give them the money and they don't want to have a tax bill, well, then they can sell the shares, use the money to pay the capital gains tax, and then actually hand over the money.
Right.
And what that would do is, the children would be getting less money, but, it wouldn't eat as much into their threshold, and the parents, I think most importantly, wouldn't be left with a large tax bill.
Okay, well, obviously there's a lot more to it as well, and all that information is in this week's Irish Country Living. Peter, thanks very much.
My pleasure.
The Irish Farmers Journal podcast, online at farmersjournal.ie and on iTunes every Thursday.